So, if you've been anywhere online recently, you've probably seen them. All those headlines declaring that the great vegan boom is over, that the plant based bubble has officially burst. But is that what's really going on? Let's dig in. It really kicked off with these big, provocative headlines, this one from the Financial Times. And it wasn't a one off thing. Pretty soon, The Atlantic was saying plant based eating has lost its appeal, and The Guardian was claiming vegan burgers were losing the culture war. Suddenly, the story was clear veganism had failed. But hold on, does that really add up? I mean, just a few short years ago, plant based everything was being hailed as the future of food. So, what on earth happened? To get the real picture, we've got to peel back a few layers. It's a lot more complicated than the headlines let on. And the very first layer, the place we have to start, is with a simple, hard fact. This was never a fair fight. You just can't understand this story without looking at the sheer, mind-boggling power of the established meat industry. Okay, let's talk numbers. In 2024 alone, the meat industry in the US brought in nearly $300 billion in revenue. Just let that number sink in for a second. It's a financial giant, an absolute behemoth with incredible resources. Now, what about the other side, the entire plant-based alternative sector in that very same year? Just under $4 billion. It's barely a rounding error in comparison. And when you see it like this, visually, it's just whoa. This isn't just a power gap. It is a Grand Canyon-sized chasm in money, in resources, and, as we'll see, in political influence. And that influence isn't just theoretical. Research from Stanford found that between 2014 and 2020, the meat and dairy industries received 190 times more in lobbying money than plant-based alternatives did. 190 times. That kind of money doesn't just buy ads, it stacks the entire political and regulatory deck in your favor. And yep, that money was definitely put to use. Groups with deep ties to the meat industry, like the Center for Consumer Freedom, launched these multi-million-dollar campaigns. They were designed to paint plant-based products as unnatural, as scary, as full of chemicals. It's a classic disinformation playbook, and it's incredibly effective. All right, so that's the first layer. But while the meat industry was fighting from the outside, the vegan movement was dealing with a massive crisis exploding from within. And it all centered on the very public, very dramatic implosion of its online stars. We're talking about the rise of the vegan fluencer. You know the type. Super charismatic people online who built these huge followings, and in many cases, their entire careers, by showing off their seemingly perfect, beautiful, plant-based lives. For millions of people, they were the face of modern veganism. And then it all started to unravel fast. In March 2019, you had the huge scandal that fans called #Fishgate, where a massive raw vegan YouTuber named Relvana was accidentally caught on camera with a plate of fish. The outrage was insane. And then the dominoes just kept falling. Other huge names like Bonnie Rebecca and Tim Schief publicly announced they were quitting veganism, all citing really serious health problems. The online community just went into a total meltdown. And these weren't just, vague complaints. Many, like this former vegan, Ashley Jane O'Connell, described these absolutely debilitating health crises. They were talking about feeling exhausted, weak, chronically sick. It created this powerful and scary counter-narrative that the vegan diet itself was the villain. And what made it worse was this massive disconnect between what they were selling online and what was happening in real life. Get this. Just 1 month after Raviana had secretly started eating fish again because of her health, she posted a photo with the caption, "Vegan booty gains." For her followers, this wasn't just a diet change, it felt like a total betrayal. So, it's a pretty grim picture, right? Powerful industry on one side, imploding influencers on the other. But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if the real culprit behind these health disasters wasn't veganism at all? This is the question that changes everything. Because when you really look closer, you realize these influencers weren't just promoting veganism, the ethical philosophy of not using animal products. Nope, they were pushing something else entirely. They were promoting incredibly extreme, highly restrictive fad diets. I'm talking about things like 25-day water fasts, juice cleanses, fruit-only diets, this low-fat raw foodism. Let's be really clear. These are not balanced, healthy diets by any stretch of the imagination. They're nutritional experiments, and frankly, they often have pretty predictable and dangerous results. And when you look at the data, a stunningly clear pattern emerges. One deep dive analysis looked at 23 of the most prominent ex-vegan YouTubers, and it found that a huge majority, 16 of them, had followed one of these extreme restrictive diets right before they started reporting all their health problems. That's not a coincidence. That is a smoking gun. In fact, the proof was hiding in plain sight in their very own What I Eat in a Day videos. Analysis of their own content showed that influencers like Ravana and Raw Alignment were often eating as little as 1,200 or 1,400 calories a day. And they were suffering from massive nutritional deficiencies, not enough protein, not enough fat, not enough essential minerals, and they were promoting this to millions of people as the pinnacle of health. So where does this all leave us? It means this story isn't a simple case of veganism failed. Not at all. It's actually a story about a movement having to grow up and move past the online hype cycle to find a much more mature, more sustainable way forward. And there are actually really smart models out there for what this looks like. Take Denmark, for example. Instead of making this a huge culture war, they launched a national action plan. They're investing in plant-based foods, they're integrating them as a business opportunity alongside meat, not as a threat, and they're normalizing it by avoiding those polarizing labels. It's about evolution, not a revolution. So you see, the headlines got it wrong. This was never really a story about vegans winning or losing. It's the story of a movement being forced to mature, to grow beyond the influencer hype, and, most importantly, to learn the crucial difference between a core philosophy and a dangerous fad diet. And that kind of leaves all of us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? In a world that is just flooded with industry spin on one side and influencer hype on the other, the real challenge is for each of us to figure out how we cut through all that noise to decide what's actually good for our health. Something to think about. Thanks for watching.